Good morning.
In unison, good morning.
Counsel, you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. We've asked permission of the court, by stipulation of both sides, to take a witness out of order because of his schedule, if we could.
You may do that.
We would call George Lopez to the stand, please.
Come forward, please. When you get to the witness stand, remain standing. Face the clerk here, and raise your right hand.
I do. Please be seated. State and spell your name for the record.
George Lopez. George Lopez.
Thank you.
May I proceed?
You may.
Mr. Lopez, good morning.
Good morning.
Sir, what is your current occupation?
I'm a comedian, actor.
And do you have a television show at this time?
I do, named George Lopez, on ABC.
How long has that show been in progress?
The show has been on for 4 years.
You're expected to go on for another 4?
I'd like 3 more, and then to retire.
Mr. Lopez, prior to going on television, what were you doing professionally?
I was a host of a radio program in Los Angeles, which was on 92.3, Mega 92.3, in the morning.
For what period of time did you do that?
From November of 99 to August of 2000.
Have you been a stand-up comic for some period of time?
25 years.
Are you familiar with the Laugh Factory in Los Angeles?
Yes, sir, I am.
And where is the Laugh Factory?
It's located on Sunset Boulevard.
Is that
in Hollywood?
Is that a nightclub that features comedians?
It is.
And have you performed there?
Many times.
Over what period of time have you performed at the Laugh Factory?
I've probably performed there over the last 15 years.
Do you know Jamie Masada?
Yes, sir, I do.
What is Mr. Masada's association with the Laugh Factory?
He's the owner of the Laugh Factory.
Are there other Laugh Factories other than the one on Sunset in Los Angeles?
I understand he opened one in New York.
Have you ever appeared at the one in New York?
I have not.
What is the comedy camp that's associated with the Laugh Factory? What's that?
Well, Jamie Masada, for years, has had a program where they took underprivileged youth and used comedians who worked the club as kind of mentors to the kids, and they would teach them stand-up, and also, give them something to do, with writing jokes, and performing, and stuff. And it was available during the day when nothing really was going on at the Laugh Factory.
Do comedians periodically come by and assist with mentoring the children?
Yes, sir.
What's the criteria for being a child attending that club?
I think Jamie puts it out, and all. You don't really need to pay anything, it's just whether you're interested and have, a way to get to the Laugh Factory, you can sign up.
Do you know if these are children that are either at risk or disadvantaged in some fashion?
Most of the time they're at risk and underprivileged youth.
Do you know how many years Mr. Masada has been running the comedy camp?
It seems, to me, he's been doing it for about 7 or 8 years.
Does he periodically solicit the assistance of the comedians from the entertainment community?
Yes, sir.
And are you one of them?
I am one of them.
How many times, and perhaps times, is not quite the right way to ask it, but on which occasions have you assisted in working with the kids at comedy camp?
Over the years I've been asked several times. And I've only participated one time, and that was in the fall of 99.
And by one time, does that mean one single occasion, or one camp?
One camp.
And that's for a period of time of how long, then?
Probably 7 weeks.
All right. Were you there for the bulk of those weeks?
Yes, sir.
Do you know the Arvizo family?
I do.
And do you know the children who are members of the Arvizo family?
Yes, I do.
How do you know them?
Jamie asked me if I would participate in the camp, that there was a special Latino family that was underprivileged and they had requested me, and, it was a sister and 2 brothers. And I said yes.
What are their names?
Devellin, Gavin and Arvizo.
And for what period of time did you work with those 3 kids?
I worked with them in the fall, probably from the middle of November through the end, the middle of October till the end of November.
What year was that? Do you recall?
I think it was 99.
Okay. How old were the kids, as best you recall?
I think Devellin was probably 15. Star was, I think, 9 or 10. And Gavin was 11.
How did they do in the comedy camp?
They were pretty good. They were fearless. So, they talked about a lot of things that I talked about, coming from an underprivileged background. And, they were fearless in their performing. And they were kind of very sweet, and very kind.
Did you work with them the entirety of that time?
I did.
Did you work with other kids, or just those three?
I did not. Just those three.
How many sessions do you think you had with them?
Probably like 7. On Mondays, from like 3 o'clock in the afternoon to about 5 o'clock. Just 2 hours a week.
Did you get to meet their mother?
I did.
What is her name?
Her name is Janet.
All right. Over the same period of time, did you see her?
I only saw Janet during the period of time that we spent at the Laugh Factory.
Was she there every time?
She was there.
With the kids?
Every time.
Do you know how they got there?
They took the bus.
Did that impress you in some way?
Absolutely. I mean, anybody that rides the bus in Los Angeles is a hero to me. Laughter.
Do you know from how far away they were coming?
They came from East Los Angeles.
To Hollywood. Is that correct?
To Hollywood.
During the period of time that you knew the Arvizos in association with the Laugh Factory, did Janet Arvizo ever ask you for any assistance in any way?
No.
Did she ever ask you for money in any way?
No.
This went on for a period of how many months, to your knowledge?
Well, the whole time that I've known the Arvizo family, it was probably 8 months.
Did you ever meet the kids' father during the time that the kids were at the comedy camp?
Yes.
And what is his name?
His name is David.
At some point in time, did you become aware of the fact that one of the children became ill, seriously ill?
Yes.
And how did that come about?
I got a phone call from Janet on my cell phone, and, as any mother would be, completely distraught and was asking for help. And I went to the hospital as soon as I found out that Gavin was as sick as he was.
The call then came from Janet?
Yes.
And did you then go to the hospital?
I did.
And what did you find when you got there?
Well, I found Gavin in dire condition. I mean, he was really just clinging to life. And that's when I met David. I had never seen him before until I showed up at the hospital.
You didn't meet him during the time. Maybe I'm wrong about this. During the time that the kids were at the camp, at the comedy camp, that period of a couple months.
Right.
Did you meet David Arvizo?
I did not.
You met him for the first time at the hospital?
Yes.
Do you know approximately how long after the completion of the comedy camp it was that Gavin became ill?
Probably 6 weeks.
When you went to the hospital, did you go by yourself or with somebody else?
I took my wife with me.
And your wife's name is?
Ann.
Did you return to the hospital on other occasions to visit with Gavin?
Yes, I did.
Over what period of time do you believe you went to the hospital?
Over the next 4 months.
Did you ever visit him at other locations besides at the hospital?
Yes.
Where did you visit him?
I visited him at his home in El Monte.
All right. Do you know this to be his home or his grandparents' home?
I think it was his grandparents' home.
Can you describe that home in El Monte for us?
It was a tract home in El Monte that. It was one of those places where, probably a 2-bedroom house where the living and kitchen blend into the same room, and it probably had every stick of furniture they'd ever owned in it. And it had this one room that looked like a suite out of the Four Seasons.
And what room was that?
That was Gavin's room.
And the rest of the house?
Reminiscent of my own childhood. Very, kind of plastic over the couch, and plastic runners on the floor, and birds, and dogs, and things like that.
Modest?
Modest, to say the least.
All right. And the one room that Gavin was in, describe that for us, as best you can.
That room was prepared for Gavin because he was coming out of the hospital. I think Jamie had made it so that he could get a hospital bed. And it was. The carpet was removed, and it was kind of like a clean room, like a place you'd go and it was sanitary. I think you even had to wear a robe to get in.
For the entirety of that time that Gavin was ill that you were visiting him, did you have contact with his father?
I did.
Did you have contact with his mother during that time?
I did not.
Can you explain that? Do you know why?
I don't know why. When Gavin was at the Laugh Factory, I dealt with the mother. And as soon as he got sick, the mother, I never saw the mother again, and the only person I saw was the father.
Did you ever speak with her on the telephone?
I did not.
Did she ever contact you other than the initial phone call to tell you that Gavin was sick?
No.
Did she ever ask you for money?
She did not.
During your dealings with the father at that point, during the number of months that Gavin was ill, did he ever ask you for assistance in any way?
Yes.
And when do you think was the first time, if you know?
Probably the first time was maybe February or March of 2000, approximately. Yeah, around there.
But this was after Gavin became ill already?
Yes.
And in what way did he ask for assistance?
Well, he made it known that he was, strapped for cash. And at that point, I would help him with whatever I had on me. I'd give him, $40, $50 if I had it. Whatever I had, I would bring things to the hospital to try to get Gavin to eat, different kind of drinks and stuff, energy drinks and things like that.
On the 2 occasions that you went to the house in El Monte, did you see Janet on either of those occasions?
I did not.
Did you ask where she was?
I did not. I just assumed that she was working. I think she was a waitress, so when I didn't see her around Gavin, I just assumed that she was working.
Did you ever ask David why Janet wasn't at the hospital?
I did not.
During the period of time that Gavin was at the hospital, did you ever see Janet there?
I never saw her at the hospital.
Okay. Now, the requests for money from David, was that a frequent request from him?
Yes.
And did you give him money on a fairly regular basis?
Yes. Well, I wouldn't call it fairly regular. On occasion, I would say.
How much would you give him?
40 here. Whatever I had. 30, 20. I bought him a pair of shoes one time. Stuff like that. But never, a check for $10,000.
Did you become aware of the fact that there was a fundraiser, or maybe a couple fundraisers, being organized at the Laugh Factory?
I was aware that there was a single fundraiser.
Is this a fundraiser that you participated in?
I have to say I don't recall.
Have you participated in fundraisers at the Laugh Factory before?
Yes.
Is that something that's frequent at that location?
Yes, it is.
When fundraisers are held at the Laugh Factory, or any of the other entertainment clubs in Los Angeles, is there a way in which they do that? Is there kind of a traditional way that they raise money?
Well, the way they do it is Jamie would ask comedians to perform, and really that's your only obligation. You show up, you perform, and that's it. You're not, really don't understand where the money goes to or any of that aspect of it. You're just there to really give your time. And then whatever they collect goes to whoever the beneficiary is of the fundraiser.
And by what they collect, what is it that they're actually collecting?
The donation at the door, whatever the price of the ticket is.
Alright, and can that vary?
Oh, yeah.
They can make it whatever they want?
Whatever it is.
Alright, did David talk with you about doing a fundraiser on his behalf, or, rather, his child's behalf?
Yes.
And what was the nature of that discussion? What is it that he was asking you to do?
He was asking me to take care of a fundraiser for Gavin, which I was more than happy to do. But then it became apparent to me that it wasn't about Gavin anymore. I was about how Gavin was and how he was feeling. I wasn't about money for Gavin. And it seemed to me at that time that David Arvizo was more interested in the money than he was about his son.
Alright, was David working at the time, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, I don't think he was working.
Did he ever express to you any concerns about insurance, medical insurance?
I was always led to believe that they had no insurance whatsoever.
Alright, and that was from David?
Yes, sir.
You never had a conversation with Janet about that subject?
Never.
She never asked you for money?
Never did.
Alright, did you come to an understanding with David that you would assist in some kind of a fundraising effort?
Yes.
And, go ahead. That.
Okay, thanks.
You have to, there you go.
To the court reporter, hello.
What was the nature of the fundraiser that you were going to do, and where?
I was going to do a fundraiser and use the radio to raise money for Gavin, and I was going to do it at the Ice House in Pasadena. And I was going to take care, I was going to do it myself. I was going to plan the whole thing. And because of my schedule at the radio, we kind of got a little behind. And David became, pretty aggressive about when it was going to happen and how much he thought we could raise and that kind of stuff.
What do you mean by pretty aggressive?
A lot of phone calls. A lot of, when's it going to happen? And I said, I'm working right now, man. We're trying to put it together. We're trying to get guys to perform. And every call was about the same thing.
Did he always inquire about the money that you would raise?
Yes, he did.
Did he ask about specific amounts?
Yeah, he did. He asked about how much I thought we could raise.
What did you tell him?
I told him that with those things, you never know. I mean, you never know how much you're going to raise. And really, when I do fundraisers, it was never about, how much money do you think you could raise? It was about getting it off successfully. It wasn't about the bottom line. It was about doing a fundraiser.
Did he ever talk to you about doing a blood drive on behalf of his son?
Yes.
And when was that going to be?
When we found out Gavin was ill and needed blood, my wife was instrumental in kind of arranging a smaller blood drive for Gavin.
Okay. Was that something that involved David Arvizo?
I don't believe so.
Or did that involve your wife?
My wife.
That wasn't requested by David?
It was not.
Do you know if Janet Arvizo had anything to do with that?
I don't think so.
Okay. Was that done at the Laugh Factory, or someplace else?
I think it was done at the Red Cross. And you just say that the blood is going to a certain person. That's how they do it.
Now, as time went on in preparation for this benefit at the Ice House, did you get more and more calls?
I did.
More and more frequently?
I did, yes.
Was he asking pretty much the same thing?
Always.
You've dealt with other benefits for other people in need, have you not?
Yes, I have.
Was there something unique about David's behavior as compared to the others?
Yeah, I mean, the guy was like, he was. It was more than one call, and it was always about the same thing. And he'd call while I was on the radio, while I was working. I couldn't talk to him. And after a while, it became, I told my wife Ann that it was becoming apparent to me that it wasn't a good idea to have the fundraiser. I decided not to do it because I didn't like the way it was kind of turning out.
Was there a particular event that occurred that put you over the top on this, made you decide not to do it?
Yes.
What was that?
On May 5th of that year, I think 2000. Whatever the year, 2000. I think, to the best of my knowledge, it's 2000. I was doing a show at the Acapulco restaurant on May 5th from 5 o'clock to 10 o'clock in the morning in El Monte. And at 10 o'clock, he approached me outside of the restaurant, right in front of the restaurant, and asked me aggressively what was the deal with the fundraiser. And I told him that I didn't think it was going to happen. And he said, "What do you mean it's not going to happen?" And I said, "It doesn't look like it's going to happen." And then his tone changed, and we had words, and that was the last time I ever saw him.
Did he ever call you again thereafter?
No.
All right. Was there an event that preceded that affected your decision?
Yes. There was a situation with a wallet at my house.
All right. Let's talk about this. Let's start with, first of all, did you ever take Mr. Arvizo and any of the kids, or Gavin, out shopping?
I did.
All right. Did that begin with a visit to your home?
Yes, it did.
And your home at that time was in what area?
In Sherman Oaks, California.
Have you moved since then?
I have.
Who came to your home with David Arvizo?
Gavin.
Only Gavin?
I think Star might have come also.
Okay. Do you recall if Devellin was there?
She was not there.
Where did you go that day? What did you do?
Well, I picked them up in El Monte. I brought them to the house, and they played in the backyard for a little bit. And then I took them to Pizza Hut and I took them to the mall, and we walked around the mall a little bit. And then I brought them home, brought them to the house, and they used the restroom, and then I drove them back to El Monte.
Alright. Was Gavin still ill at this time, or had he already gone into remission?
He had kind of gone into a little remission. He was out of the hospital.
But he was still going back and forth for treatment?
Yes.
How was his appearance at that time?
He was kind of energetic. I think he was, he was okay. He was walking around. He wasn't, as frail as he was when he was in the hospital. He was doing okay.
Alright. And David was there, is that right?
Yes.
Did you notice anything unusual about their behavior when they were in the stores?
Well, like any kid in the mall, Gavin wanted everything, and David kind of was off to the side, a little bit in the back, kind of conspicuously out, just out of the way. He wasn't really with us. Kind of off to the side.
Was Gavin asking for things?
Yes.
And were you purchasing things for him?
Not everything, but a few things.
Okay. Did David's behavior strike you as unusual?
Yeah, I think so.
In what way?
In that he was, he was a little, distant. He was distant but yet, always a little tense, He was a little, not as relaxed as somebody would be, I guess.
Did you feel he should have been a little more responsible as a parent while his child was asking you for things?
Yeah, he wasn't anywhere around.
Alright. Now, when you finally got back home, and David left, what did you notice in the house?
Well, I took them home, and I came back. And we had this room that really a lot of people have. It's very popular with Mexicans. We have a room that's no one's allowed to sit in, and everything stays put. And it was our house, and even I wasn't allowed in that room. So on the mantle, there's nothing on the fireplace mantle except this brown and black wallet. So as I walk in the house, your eyes immediately go to the mantle. It's the first thing you see. So I see this wallet, and I pick it up and it's not mine, and I open it up, and it has an ID, Gavin's ID, and I look, and there's a $50 bill in it, one $50 bill. So I go to the kitchen, where my wife is, and I say, Ann, Gavin left his wallet. So we call Gavin, tell him that he left his wallet. They say to drop it off at the Laugh Factory. We end up sending it in the mail so that we can get rid of it. And then sometime later, I understand through Jamie Masada at the Laugh Factory, that David Arvizo told Jamie Masada, who owns the Laugh Factory, that I had taken $300 out of Gavin's wallet.
Okay. Janet Arvizo never accused you.
No.
Of taking money from her son's wallet, is that correct?
No, that's correct.
Did you ever have a conversation with Janet Arvizo about the wallet?
Never.
Alright. Did Janet Arvizo ever ask you for money?
Objection. Asked and answered 3 times.
Sustained.
Following this event, the conversation with Mr. Masada.
Yes.
About the wallet, did you ever have another conversation with David Arvizo?
I never did. Oh, after the wallet, I had the exchange on May 5th.
Now, when you had the exchange on May 5th, did you already know? Had you already had the conversation with Mr. Masada about the wallet?
My wife did.
Alright. Did you know about it at the time?
I did.
Of the conversation? Was that one of the reasons that you no longer wish to be associated with them?
That might have put me over the top.
Were you involved in any fundraisers for the Arvizo family at all?
I can't recall.
The one that was at the Laugh Factory, you don't have a recollection of having been there?
I think early on I may have. But I can't remember. I think the one that Fritz Coleman hosted was the one that I performed at. But it was early on, so I really can't say.
Other than the one that you organized, or began to organize at the Ice House, were you organizing any other fundraisers for the Arvizo family?
No.
Did you give any money to any other member of the family of the Arvizo family, other than David Arvizo?
I did not.
Objection. Misstates the evidence.
Overruled. The answer was, is in. Next question.
Let me have just one moment, please. In Janet's telephone call to you when she announced that her child was ill, did she ask for your assistance at that time in that conversation?
Other than.
Objection. Asked and answered.
Overruled. You may answer.
Can I answer?
Yes.
Other than just finding out her son was gravely ill and didn't know what to do, That's what I got from the call.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Cross-examine?
Yes, please, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Lopez.
Good afternoon.
My name is Tom Mesereau, and I speak for Michael Jackson. We've never spoken before, right?
No, sir.
Now, you interviewed with the Santa Barbara sheriffs on last Friday, correct?
I did.
And who did you interview with?
I interviewed with the gentleman who was just asking me the questions.
That's Prosecutor Zonen?
Yes.
Okay, and how long did you meet with Prosecutor Zonen?
Me personally?
Yes.
25 minutes.
And were you with your attorney?
I was.
And your attorney is sitting here today, right?
Yes.
Mr. Blancart?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you didn't want that interview to be tape recorded, correct?
That's correct.
So as far as you know, there was no tape recording of what you said, right?
That's correct.
Okay, now, you told Prosecutor Zonen that you think you gave David Arvizo, in total, something less than $400, right?
Right.
And this had to do with monies you gave him at the hospital primarily, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
But you also told Prosecutor Zonen that you went shopping with David and Gavin kept asking you to buy him things in front of his father, correct?
Yes.
And you found it kind of strange that the father never told him to stop doing that or spoke up, right?
Right.
Okay, and did you buy him anything while you were shopping with Gavin and the father?
Yes.
Okay, what did you buy Gavin?
You know, we took him to the Discovery store and bought a few, maybe like a race car track, and a ball that extends, and things like that.
Okay, and how often would you buy? Well, let me rephrase that. How often did you go shopping with Gavin and David?
That was the only time.
Just one time?
Just one time.
And to your knowledge, how many times, if you remember, did Gavin ask you to buy something for him in front of his father?
4.
Okay, did you buy whatever he wanted every time?
Well, no.
Okay, you bought some of the things he wanted and didn't buy other things he wanted?
Kind of expensive.
Didn't you also bring gifts to the hospital when Gavin was ill?
Yes.
And what gifts did you bring to the hospital?
You know, cast iron cars and things like that.
Okay, but the actual money you donated was to David directly, correct?
Yes.
Did you ever give Gavin anything directly?
No.
Okay, now, do you remember signing a declaration under penalty of perjury in this case on February 16, 2005?
Yeah.
Do you remember testifying under penalty? Not testifying. Do you remember swearing under penalty of perjury the following? I never provided money to the Arvizos or any of them.
Yes.
Well, that wasn't true, was it?
Well, at that time I couldn't recall.
So on February 16 you couldn't recall, under penalty of perjury, if you gave any money to any of the Arvizos, correct?
That's right.
But when you met with the prosecutor on Friday, you suddenly recalled that you gave David money on a periodic basis, right?
Right.
You gave him, what, no more than $40 or $50 at a time, correct?
Right.
And you thought the total was less than $400, right?
That's correct.
Okay, now, from what you said today, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you said that you were involved in planning for a fundraiser, but never went through with it?
That's correct.
Okay, and you didn't go through with it because David's activities offended you, correct?
That's correct.
You thought he was leaning on you too hard for money, right?
That's right.
And was it your understanding that he was married to Janet at that time?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember signing another declaration under penalty of perjury in this case on January 18, 2005?
Yes.
And you said, I have not been involved, appeared or participated in a fundraiser for the minor and alleged victim in the Michael Jackson case, right?
That's correct.
That wasn't totally truthful, was it?
I could not recall.
Okay, so on January 18 you couldn't recall if you had any involvement in a fundraiser, But after you signed that declaration under penalty of perjury, you remembered that you were involved in some of the early planning stages. Is that correct?
Well, I signed I couldn't recall, and then remembered.
Okay. So that's 2 declarations you signed under penalty of perjury in this case, right? One on January 18th, and one on February 16th, right?
Yes.
Okay. And after signing those declarations under penalty of perjury, you then remembered some other facts that, had you known at the time, you wouldn't have signed the declaration?
Well, at the time I couldn't recall.
Okay. Let me go back to your discussion with Prosecutor Zonen. Okay? Now, you indicated to him that you first met the Arvizo children at the comedy camp, right?
That's right.
And that's where you met Janet, right?
That's right.
And to your knowledge, Janet was always at comedy camp when you were there and saw the children, correct?
Correct.
And you told Prosecutor Zonen that the children would act on stage, correct?
That's right.
And they would often act out little themes about their poverty, correct?
That's right.
They would talk about not having any money, right?
Uh-huh.
They would talk about roaches in their home, correct?
Correct.
And Janet would be sitting there, right?
Yes.
You also told Prosecutor Zonen that Janet told you a story about her children diving into a fountain for pennies, correct?
That's correct.
Now, after you had finished coaching the kids at the Laugh Factory, did you ever see Janet again?
I did not.
To your knowledge?
No.
Okay, so after you finished coaching the kids at the Laugh Factory, there was a period of time that elapsed between your coaching the kids and your hearing from Janet on the phone, correct?
That's correct.
She called you up very upset that Gavin was seriously ill, right?
Right.
And asked for assistance of some kind. I'm not saying it was financial assistance, but she asked you to help, right?
More emotional assistance.
But she also asked you to go to the hospital, correct?
Right.
You went to the hospital?
Right.
You went there many times to help Gavin when he was ill?
Yes.
When you first got to the hospital to see Gavin, you saw David, is that correct?
That's correct.
And every time you went to the hospital to see Gavin, you never saw Janet, you always saw David, right?
Right.
Okay, how many times do you think you visited Gavin at the hospital when you saw David?
Approximately 10.
Okay, and these are the visits when you often brought gifts for Gavin, right?
Right.
You brought food, right?
Yes, sir.
And what else did you bring him?
The car occasionally. But other times I just went.
Okay.
I didn't bring something every time I went.
Now, would David try to hit you up for money at the hospital?
What he would do is he would, imply how bad off he was doing,
And that was pretty often, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
Every time I saw him.
And you never discussed his financial situation with Janet, because she never was around, correct?
That's right.
Now, after you had helped David with the cash you gave him, and after you had helped Gavin with the gifts you bought him, at some point Janet called you up and thanked you for what you'd done for the family, correct?
I don't recall getting a phone call from Janet.
Didn't you tell the prosecutors that at some point Janet called you up and thanked you for the nice things you'd done for the family?
I didn't speak to her.
You never. She never called you and said thank you.
She never called me.
Okay. Now, you thought the family lived in El Monte, correct?
Yes.
Alright, and why did you think they lived in El Monte?
Because every time I went to see Gavin, that's where I went, to the grandparents' house.
And why did you go to that location? Did someone tell you that's where they lived?
That's where David told me to go.
And you assumed that that's where they lived, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you never saw David at comedy camp, correct?
That's correct.
Alright, it was always Janet. But suddenly when he got ill, it seemed like it changed. You always saw David and you never saw Janet?
That's right.
Do you know what time of day you often went to the hospital?
I usually went after I got off the radio, probably around 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock.
Now, when you were coaching the kids at comedy camp, you often took them to eat, right?
Yes, sir.
And Janet would be with you, correct?
That's right.
And you would treat the whole family to food, right?
Well, snacks.
Yeah, but, I mean, you did that quite often for them, didn't you?
Yes.
And they always appeared grateful for what you had done.
Yes, sir.
They seemed like a nice family, right?
Yes.
Okay, alright. You participated in their graduation ceremony at the comedy club, right?
Yes.
And that was, what, about 3 or 4 months in duration?
Yes.
Alright, and approximately what months were they?
You know, I can't recall what month that was.
Okay, now, between the comedy camp ending and Janet calling you to talk about the hospital, how much time elapsed, if you remember?
6 weeks.
Okay, alright.
Over the holidays of that year. Probably 6 weeks.
And Janet asked you to come and spend time with Gavin, right?
Well, he was sick, so I went to see him.
But she asked you to go spend time with him, right?
I don't know if she particularly asked. But when, I was a fan of Gavin's. So when he was not well, I went to the hospital to see him as a friend.
Would it refresh your recollection if I just show you a police report where it says you told the police, Janet asked George if he would come spend time with Gavin?
It could.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Lopez, have you had a chance to see that report?
I saw it.
Okay. Does it refresh your recollection about what you told the sheriff?
It does not.
It does not?
I mean, if she asked me to, here's the difference. I mean, did she formally ask me? She said Gavin was ill and I went to the hospital. There wasn't a formal invitation.
Okay, but you didn't tell the sheriffs that. Janet asked George if he would come spend time with Gavin.
You have to repeat the question.
Yeah, okay. I'm asking you if, in your interview last Friday, you told the sheriffs Janet asked you if you would come spend time with Gavin in the hospital?
Well, in a sense, that's what that is. That's what that phone call was.
Okay. Now, you began visiting Gavin with your wife, correct?
My wife went the first time, and on a couple other occasions maybe. But for the most part, I would go right after I got off the radio, so I would go by myself. I would try to sneak away to see Gavin as much as I could, when I could.
Right. And that's when you brought him gifts and snacks?
Well, not every time, but on occasion.
Okay. Did you find it strange that you never saw Janet at the hospital?
Well, I knew she was a waitress, so I really thought she was working. I'd just say that I wasn't there all the time, so I didn't know whether she was there when I wasn't there. But every time I went, she wasn't there, so I just figured that she was always working.
You really don't know if she was working, do you?
I don't know.
Okay. And you may have thought she was a waitress, but you really don't know where she was waiting tables, right?
She never served me.
Okay. And never told you where she was working, right?
No.
And David never told you where she was working, right?
Never did.
Okay. How aggressive was David in asking for money?
It was pretty aggressive. I mean, when you're two guys talking, and the subject always comes up, you kind of get turned off to it. Every time we spoke, it was always really about money.
And he always said he had no way to pay the family's bills, right?
That's right.
And you gave him little amounts that you had in your pocket at the time?
Yeah, I only had little amounts at the time.
Okay, and you told the sheriffs you never turned down. David never turned down any gesture of kindness you offered him?
Never.
He always wanted money, didn't he?
He did.
Okay. You thought the largest money you gave him at one point was $80?
Probably around there, yeah.
Okay, alright.
I literally would give the guy everything I had in my wallet and just figured I'd get more later.
Now, did he ever tell you that he was giving any of his money to Janet?
Never.
Okay, you don't know one way or the other, do you?
I don't.
Okay, now, do you know Louise Palanker?
I don't know Louise Palanker.
Ever heard her name?
Yeah, I heard her name here.
Okay.
And on E.
Okay, You don't know anything about her. You don't know anything about her giving $10,000 to Janet, do you?
I don't.
You don't know anything about her giving $10,000 to David, do you?
No, I don't.
Did you ever hear about that?
You know, I think it's odd when a comedian has $10,000 period, you know, so I never, laughter.
Alright, okay. Now, at some point David started bragging to you about Neverland Ranch, didn't he?
Yes.
And you thought his attitude changed, correct?
Yes.
You thought he got kind of, what's the word? Snooty or snobby? Would that be the right word?
Enamored.
Enamored. That's how you described David's attitude after he told you the family had gone to Neverland Ranch?
Yes.
And he told you that Michael Jackson had given a truck to his family, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You described him to the sheriffs as smitten by his newfound association with Michael Jackson, correct?
Yes.
Now, you learned at some point that Michael Jackson was calling Gavin at the hospital, right?
Yes.
Okay. And someone told you he was calling him at, sometimes late at night and having long chats with Gavin, correct?
Right.
Did David tell you that?
I think maybe, yeah. I think maybe David did.
Alright.
In the hospital room.
At some point, you thought David was extremely engrossed with money and possessions, true?
That's correct.
Because when you visited them in El Monte, he showed off that room with the DVD and all the rest, correct?
That's right.
That's the room that you described as like the Four Seasons, right?
Right.
Did you ever know who paid to renovate that room?
No.
Okay. You don't know if the person who renovated that room was paid or not, correct?
I did not know that.
Okay. Did David ever talk about how that room became so nice?
No. My assumption was that it was Jamie Masada that had arranged that.
But you don't know for sure?
But I don't know for sure.
And if Jamie arranged it through Louise Palanker, you don't know about that?
I don't know about that.
And if the contractor who did it was never paid, you don't know about that either.
I'm going to object as speculative in testimony. The witness has repeatedly said he doesn't know.
Sustained.
Okay. Now, you told the sheriffs, Mr. Lopez, you thought David Arvizo was particularly enamored with the big screen television and the Nintendo, correct?
Yes.
You said you noticed this to a small degree with the children as well, correct?
Yes.
But not to the extent that David seemed like he wanted to impress you with his new possessions?
Very pleased.
Okay. You told the sheriff that David, everything about David seemed to be about money, right?
Yes.
Okay. You went to the El Monte address about 2 times, correct?
That's right.
Okay. And David was there both times, right?
Yes.
Who else was there during those visits?
The grandparents.
Okay. Did you ever see the children there?
I did.
Okay. Were all 3 children there, to your knowledge, on both visits?
You know, I can't recall.
Okay.
But I think Star was always kind of around Gavin.
Okay. Did you see Devellin?
On occasion, but I don't remember her being there.
Now, who arranged your visits to the El Monte address?
I would arrange them with David.
Okay. Okay. When you went shopping with David and Gavin, were Star or Devellin present?
I think Star was.
Okay. But you seemed, in your interview with the sheriffs, to particularly recall Gavin asking you to buy things for him, right?
Yes.
You never mentioned to the sheriffs that Star was asking you to buy things for him, correct?
No.
And you thought it rather odd the father never just said a word as the son looked at you and said, "Buy this for me."
It would have been nice if he stepped in.
But he never did, right?
Never did.
Did you ever talk to him about it?
No.
Ever ask him, "Why are you letting your son just keeping leaning on me like this?"
He's not my kid.
Okay. Now, would Gavin just typically come up to you and point at something and say, "Would you buy that for me?"
I'll object to typically talking about one event.
I'll rephrase it. No, it's not, Your Honor, we're not talking about one event. It's one day.
Then it's vague for exactly that reason.
You went shopping with him on one particular day, right?
Right.
You went to a number of stores, correct?
Yes.
Gavin was with you, right?
Right.
David was with you?
Right.
And you think Star was with you?
I can't remember, but I think.
And in various stores, Gavin would point to items and ask you to buy them for him?
Do you know how a kid does in a store? Can you buy me this? And.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the old, oh, I really like this.
Well, but he wasn't looking at his father and saying, I really like this.
No.
He was always looking at you, with the father standing right there, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you told the sheriffs, David seemed to intentionally stand back and make no effort to rein in Gavin's requests.
That's correct.
You thought that was strange, right?
Seemed odd.
Did you take them to lunch that day?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And did you take them to lunch on any other days, do you know?
No.
Alright. Now, where did you see the wallet?
The wallet was on the fireplace mantel of my house. It was the only thing on the mantel.
And when you saw it, how did you think it got there?
It never occurred to me how it got there, because, nobody played in that room, so it was kind of odd that a wallet would end up on that mantel.
And how high up was the mantel?
Shoulder height.
Taller than Gavin, wasn't it?
At that time, maybe.
So, did it seem peculiar to you that suddenly a wallet's just lying there?
Well, being that in that room, really nothing's supposed to be in there, yeah.
Had you seen Gavin or David in that room?
No.
And how long had they been at your house?
Well, the beginning, when I first dropped them off, they played in the backyard probably about 45 minutes to an hour. And then we went to the mall and then came back. They just really came back to use the restroom, because the drive was a little far, so not much time.
And you testified, I believe, there was a $50 bill in Gavin's wallet?
Yes, sir.
And there was also an ID card, correct?
A school ID.
That was for Gavin, right?
Yes.
And you told the sheriffs you thought it was odd that Gavin would have $50 in a wallet, right?
Yeah.
Not to mention the wallet sitting up on the mantel in that room?
Right.
Okay. And what's the first thing you did when you opened the wallet, saw that Gavin's name was on an ID card, and there's a $50 bill in it? What's the first thing you did?
The first thing I did was show it to my wife, who was in the kitchen.
And then what did you do?
Then we called the Arvizo house and made arrangements to get the wallet back to them.
And how did you get it back to them?
We sent it.
Did you call the Arvizo home?
Yes.
Who did you talk to?
My wife called, and I think she spoke to David.
Okay. David said, just send it to the house.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he wanted us to take it to the Laugh Factory, but we ended up sending it to the house.
Who first talked to you about planning the fundraiser for Gavin?
At that time I was having conversations with David, and being in the hospital, so I think it was between David and I and my wife.
Okay. And you told the sheriffs David was particularly persistent and aggressive about how much money they were going to make, right?
Yes, sir.
And you were still never seeing Janet during any of this, right?
No, that's correct.
Never see her at the hospital, and she never goes to your house, right?
That's right.
At some point, your wife confronted David about his constant requests for money, right?
That's right.
Okay. And he got kind of nasty, didn't he?
He did.
Okay. Were you there?
I was not there.
Okay. But you heard about it?
I did.
And that sort of started a downhill slide in your relationship with the whole family, right?
Yes, sir.
At some point you cut off all relationships with that family, correct?
That's true.
And you called off any work that you were doing on the benefit?
That's right.
Alright, and I think you said David tried to repeatedly call you at the radio station, right?
That's correct.
Did you take his calls?
I did not.
Okay. Did you tell anybody to tell them, stop the calls?
Well, he called usually when we were on the air, but I wasn't going to take the call after his conversation with my wife.
Okay. Now, at some point you told David there's not going to be any benefit, right?
That's right.
And actually, that wasn't really correct, was it? You just weren't going to work on it anymore?
I wasn't going to do the one that I was planning.
There was some others being planned you knew about?
I think so, yeah.
How did you know about them? Through Jamie?
Through Jamie.
Did Jamie seem to be your main source of your information about the Arvizo family, other than what you saw directly?
Yeah, that's how I met them. And pretty much, everything was kind of going through Jamie. He was kind of the guy that everybody talked to.
Okay. David tried to make you feel guilty about not helping Gavin at that point, didn't he?
Yes. At the point of May 5th, he did.
And you told him basically he's an extortionist, correct?
I did.
That wasn't a pleasant conversation, was it?
It was not.
Okay.
And I don't use big words like that, Laughter.
Alright. Now, after you called him an extortionist, what happened next?
It was a pretty heated exchange. And after that, he left. And, I got to be honest with you, after that, I had no conversations with Gavin or any of the Arvizos after May 5th of that day.
You then learned at some point from Jamie Masada that Jamie had given David some money supposedly to make up for what he claimed was lost from the son's wallet.
That's right.
And the implication was that you had taken it.
That I had taken it.
And you never took a thing, right?
I did not.
Were you upset with Masada that he would even pay him something?
I was. Yeah, I was.
Did you complain to Masada?
I did. I said, how could you do that?
Okay. And he basically said to you, he wanted to make peace, or words to that effect.
Words to that effect.
Okay. Now, are you certain you never performed with Fritz Coleman at a benefit for Gavin?
I'm not certain.
So you may have done that?
I may have.
Okay. Now, did anyone ever mention to you anything about a J.C. Penney lawsuit while you knew the Arvizos?
I did not know about that until after all ties were broken.
Okay. And how did you learn about the J.C. Penney lawsuit?
I think I learned about that from.
I'm going to object as irrelevant and hearsay.
Sustained.
Okay. Do you recall, sometime after your relationship soured with the Arvizos, Janet gave you a keychain?
She did.
And approximately when was that?
That might have been maybe 6 months after my dealings with David.
Okay. So 6 months after you pretty much severed your ties with the family?
Yeah. A keychain showed up.
She approached you, correct?
I can't recall how I got it.
She gave you a keychain as a way of thanking you for what you'd done for the family, correct?
That's correct.
Do you know where that happened?
I don't. I can't remember.
Okay. Do you know approximately when it was?
No.
Okay. Do you remember speaking to her when she gave you the keychain?
I can't recall.
Okay. But you told the sheriffs, in your mind, it was her way of thanking you for what you had done for the family. You told them that in your interview, correct?
I think so.
Okay. Now, obviously it goes without saying if Janet and David were discussing ways to get money from people, you weren't there?
I'll object as speculative.
Sustained.
You spent very little time in their home, correct?
That's correct.
And you said they were from East LA. Did you mean El Monte?
I only know El Monte. So if I said East LA, I meant El Monte.
When you say El Monte, you don't mean East LA as El Monte, do you?
Well, any Chicano knows better than that.
Well, let me ask you this. You said.
That's Chicano 101. East LA is not El Monte. Laughter.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. You said that when you first started at the comedy club, they were taking a bus from East LA, right?
Right.
But you said when you visited their home, you went to El Monte.
Yeah.
So you never really visited a home for the Arvizos in East LA, correct?
I did not.
But they told you they were from East LA, true?
Yeah, I never really thought about their geographic location whatsoever.
Okay, so did it ever occur to you that there may be two residences?
No.
Well, if they said they were taking a bus from East LA, but they took you to their home in El Monte, doesn't that suggest 2 residences?
I never thought about it.
Well, as you think about it now.
I was way off. But once they got on the bus, my contact with them ended.
Okay. No further questions. Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Lopez, you understood that the El Monte home was the home that had the cleanroom for Gavin in it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that was his grandmother's home, the grandparents' home?
Right.
Did you ever ask how many people actually lived in that residence?
I never asked, but it just looked like maybe 5.
And it had been some time earlier when you were told that they were coming from East LA was in conjunction with the kids attending the comedy camp. Is that right?
Right.
Did you have any reason to believe that wasn't true?
No.
Did anybody ever take you to an address, a studio apartment on Soto Street for purposes of showing you how impoverished they were?
No.
Did anybody say anything about a residence on Soto Street for purposes of showing you how impoverished they were?
No.
Now, the story about the kids diving into the fountain, was that a story that was given to you by Janet?
Yes.
And was that in the presence of her children?
They might have been in the room, around the room, yeah. It was kind of more of a joke than an actual admonishment.
The kids were laughing at the story, weren't they?
Yeah.
What was it that she said about it?
She said she had taken the kids to the mall, and in the center of the mall there was a fountain that people would throw coins in. And she had turned her back, and when she turned back, all 3 kids were in the water getting coins.
What did she do?
She told them to get out. And, at that time everybody was pointing at the kids, like, whose kids are these? And she told the kids to put the money back.
And they did so?
They did.
Did David Arvizo ever explain to you why Janet wasn't in the home, sick?
No.
Did he ever talk to you about her having difficulty with dealing with things?
Objection. Leading. Vague.
Sustained. Leading.
Were you concerned at what you were finding at the hospital when you found out that Gavin had been visiting with Michael Jackson at his ranch?
Well, when I went to see Gavin during the day, he was, asleep. He was, tired, really tired and stuff.
That was in conjunction with David telling you he was on the phone for hours at a time in the middle of the night?
Correct.
Objection. Leading. Move to strike.
Overruled.
The keychain that Janet gave you. What did she tell you about that keychain?
I don't really remember much about the keychain other than her giving me this thing, thank you. I think it had a mustard seed in it or something.
A little mustard seed amulet?
Yeah, something like that.
Was it a new one or something that she had?
It was kind of pewter, so it kind of looked old. Pewter stuff looks old.
And she told you that was in appreciation for your help?
Yeah.
When she called you and had that conversation about her child being ill, would you have gone to the hospital regardless of whether she asked you?
Objection. Calls for speculation.
Sustained.
What was your intent when she called you and notified you of her child's illness?
When the first time I met the Arvizos at the Laugh Factory, I really enjoyed their company, and the kids were great. And I had a really good time teaching them, and they were fun, I'd take them and buy them things after, snacks. And I kind of invested in them, because I saw a lot of myself in their family. So when I got the call that he wasn't well, I did what any friend would do, is go to the hospital.
You said you were a big fan of Gavin. What do you mean by that?
He's a great kid. He had a lot of spirit. And he was fearless and, he did little dances and stuff. It was great.
Even when he was asking you to buy things for him at the shopping mall?
I don't know if he danced and asked at the same time, but he was always kind of, interesting.
When you said you cut off the family, did that have anything to do with the rest of the family beyond David?
Objection. Leading. Vague. Asked and answered.
It's certainly not asked and answered.
Overruled. You may answer. Would you want the question read back?
Yeah, that would be nice. Thank you. Record read. It was everyone in the family. At that time I was only having conversations with David by phone. And when that happened, I never spoke to anyone in the family again.
You're saying you cut off everybody in the family?
Yes.
But your reason for doing so? What were your reasons for cutting off the other members of the family besides David?
Was, that the guy was aggressively trying to get money from me. And when I cut him off, the rest of the family followed. I wasn't going to talk to Gavin behind his father's back, and, the altercation we had May 5th, he used that, against me, because I said to him, I've only tried to help you. And he said, you've helped me? And at that point, it was just, kind of the wind went out of my sails. And then he said, what am I supposed to tell Gavin? And I said, tell him his father's an extortionist.
Was there anything that Devellin, Star or Janet did to contribute to your cutting off the family or your attention?
No.
Thank you. No further questions.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may step down.
Thanks.
And we'll call Ann Lopez to the stand.
Come to the witness stand, please. When you get to the witness stand, remain standing. Face the clerk over here and raise your right hand.
I do.
Please be seated. State and spell your name for the record.
Ann Serano Lopez. ANN. SERRANO. Lopez. LOPEZ.
Thank you.
May I proceed?
Yes.
I guess my first question is, what is it like being married to George Lopez?
A lot of fun.
And you are married to George Lopez?
Yes, I am married to George Lopez.
Tell me a little bit about yourself. Are you currently working?
I'm an independent television producer, and a mother, and... What else would you like to know?
You've been married to Mr. Lopez for how long?
For 11.5 years.
And prior to that, what profession were you in?
I was a television producer and a casting director.
What does a television producer do? We all know the term. None of us know what they actually do.
We find projects to produce. So let's say I would find a property that I would want to make into a movie, and secure a writer, secure the production company that would produce it for me. Secure the actors. And just make sure the entire production gets off on budget.
You've been married to George Lopez how long?
11.5 years.
And you have one child?
One child.
At some point in time, were you aware of the fact that your husband would periodically perform at the Laugh Factory?
Oh, yes.
Did you know Jamie Masada?
Yes, very well.
Were you ever introduced to the Arvizo family?
Only in the hospital after Gavin got ill. I was home with our daughter, so I didn't ever go to the comedy camp.
Did you know that your husband was a mentor to the 3 children?
Yes, I did.
In conjunction with the comedy camp?
Yes, I did.
All right. At some point in time, did you become aware that one of those 3 children had become ill with cancer?
Yes. It was around 2 months after the graduation.
Did you visit with him at the hospital? And, with him, I mean Gavin.
Yes, I actually met Gavin in the hospital.
All right. Had you ever had a conversation with Gavin's mother prior to his being stricken with cancer?
No.
Did you ever meet her?
No.
Did she ever call you prior to that?
No.
All right. Have you ever actually met her at any time?
No.
All right. So you wouldn't be able to recognize her if you saw her?
No.
Okay. Did you ever have any telephone conversations with her at all?
Yes.
When did the telephone conversations begin?
The first telephone conversation was when Gavin was stricken with cancer. She called our home very distraught, and George spoke to her. And then I got on the phone to comfort her about her sick child.
All right. And did you get on the phone and have a conversation with her at that time?
Yes, I did.
And did she tell you the extent of the illness that she was dealing with?
Yes. She talked about the cancer.
Did she say anything to you about the description of the cancer that he had, or the diagnosis, or the prognosis?
Just that it was very grave. That there was a very large tumor, 10, 11, 12, something like that, pounds in his cavity, and that they were going to have to take out a kidney, I believe, and maybe a spleen. That there were. You know, it was. That there was spots on his lung. They had found spots on the lung. So it was, very, very severe.
How often did you go to the hospital?
I went less than my husband. Probably 6, 7 times.
The hospital we're talking about, can you tell us which hospital it is and where?
I believe it was Kaiser Permanente.
And do you know where, the location?
In Los Angeles, I think, towards downtown.
The Sunset and Vermont Hospital facility?
That's where it was, uh-huh.
When you got there, or any of the times that you went there, did you ever see Janet?
No.
Did you ever talk with her on the telephone while you were at the hospital?
Yes. When she would call, I would get on the phone and speak to her, and just try to comfort her.
Were those frequent conversations?
No. Maybe 2 or 3 times.
Okay. How often do you think it was that you visited Gavin at the hospital?
Between 6 and 8 times. I'm not sure exactly how many.
Was David there?
Always.
All right. Now, David is who?
David is Gavin's father.
And his last name?
Arvizo.
On each of the times that you were there, he was there?
Yes.
Did you go on when you went to the hospital to visit, was it always at a certain time frame?
No.
Would it be at various times during the day?
Yes. Sometimes in the afternoon. Sometimes in the evening. It just depended on my husband's schedule.
Did you ask Mr. Arvizo, David Arvizo, where his wife was?
Yes, I did.
And what did he tell you?
He told me that she was just distraught. That she couldn't handle being there at the hospital. That she would break down. And that she emotionally couldn't handle it.
Did you have concerns about that?
Yes, I did.
Did you have conversations with David Arvizo about his financial state?
He had conversations with me about his financial state.
And tell me the distinction.
Well, he would hint that they were having financial problems, and would tell me he wasn't sure how they were going to pay their bills or how they were going to pay the rent. Also, he told me that they were living in a studio apartment, and he didn't know how he was going to get Gavin's hospital bed and how Gavin could go back to that place.
This is early on, I assume?
The very first visit.
Okay. Did you know where they were living, where their residence was?
No.
Did you ever go to visit them at his home?
No.
Or did you go to visit Gavin at the time that Gavin was out of the hospital in a residence?
No.
So you don't know necessarily where they were living?
No.
All right. What did you think about his initial comment on that first visit about his financial state? What did you understand was going on?
Well, it seemed to me that, they were a lower income family. He was taking a leave of absence from his job. He told me that. And he said that one of them had to work to make money for the family. And I found it a little strange that it would be Janet because he said that she was a waitress. And I thought, well, a waitress doesn't make as much as he was making. And he had told me his job was the job that had medical care, the medical insurance.
Did he express concern to you about his medical insurance?
No.
Did he have any conversation with you at all about who was paying the bills?
No, he just said it was covering the expenses and that his job covered the medical insurance. It wasn't until one of the later visits that he said he was worried that the insurance was going to run out. And I told him, then, well, you should go back to work.
Did he tell you that he was concerned the insurance would run out because he was not at work?
Yes, because his leave of absence was already very long, and if he didn't go back to work, then the medical insurance would lapse.
What did you tell him?
I told him he should go back to work and get on with it, and get his insurance for his son. That was the most important thing, that his son was covered with medical insurance.
At some point in time, did you make a decision, perhaps with your husband or by yourself, as to whether or not the Lopez family would be contributing money from your own pockets to David Arvizo?
Yes.
And what was that decision?
No.
Had you talked with David about that specifically?
No. From the very beginning, I saw things that just seemed very strange to me. I didn't know them at all. This was the first meeting. David and I walked, let George have some time with Gavin the first meeting and be in the room. And there was like a glass partition. So David and I stepped out and we were talking. And, you know, at first it was very normal. He was very concerned about his son and the medical attention. But when he walked back into the room, I noticed that the children shied away from him. And there was no closeness, there was no touching. I didn't see anything that would indicate that there was a bond between these children and their father, especially at such a difficult time. And then when he told me that Janet was not going to be at the hospital, I also found that, being a mother, I found that very strange. Here was this woman that would take the bus to take her 3 children to comedy camp for months on end, but she can't be at the hospital with her sick child. That just seemed very strange to me. So I thought there was something a little off there.
Did you ever have David Arvizo and any of his children at your home?
Yes, we did.
On more than one occasion?
Just once.
And when was that? Do you recall?
I'm not sure exactly the time frame. I was home with my daughter who was very young. But it was one time when George wanted to visit him in the hospital, and David was. Gavin was out of the hospital. And so George said, "Is it okay if we bring him to our house?" And I said, "Sure." So they came and visited.
And you were living where at the time?
In Sherman Oaks.
That's not where you live currently?
No.
All right. When he came to your household, what did you do that day?
David and Gavin. George went and picked up David and Gavin and brought them to our home. And we have a very large swing set in the back, and they were playing on the swing set, and meeting my daughter, and Gavin.
Gavin was how old at the time?
10 and a half. Between 10 and 11. I'm not sure.
Okay. Go ahead.
And it was a hot day. So I said to George, maybe we should. I didn't feel it was very good for him to be in the heat. And I said, well, maybe we should just go take them to eat and maybe just go see a movie or something. So we took them to Pizza Hut, and he and my daughter played video games, and we had pizza. And then we took them to the mall.
Okay. What did you notice about anyone's behavior at the mall, either David or Gavin?
Well, Gavin was running in and out of stores like, we were going into stores and things, and buying him some toys and things like that. But it got to be a little overboard where he was asking for, 3 or 4 toys at every store. And I kept looking over at David, and David would just walk away, and. Which made it. He wasn't saying anything to Gavin like, okay, Gavin, that's enough, trying to rein him in at any point. It was like he definitely walked away and, made us feel like, okay, buy him what he wants. So.
Give me a sense of how long after you received that initial call about Gavin's illness did this visit occur to your home and to the shopping mall?
I'm not sure exactly, but about 6 months, I would think.
Was Gavin doing better at that time?
Yes.
Was he still involved in treatment?
Oh, yes.
But at the time that he was visiting you, he was.
He was in remission, yes.
He was in remission at that point and able to walk around?
Uh-huh.
Did he appear to you to be still frail or?
Yes, that's why I didn't want him to be in the heat. He was walking around, but he still was very pale. He didn't have any hair. He was still a very sick boy.
When you got home after the visit to the shopping mall, and Gavin and David left, did you notice anything in the house?
I did not. I just went straight to the kitchen. I started to prepare dinner. And when George came home, I heard him say, "Hey, what's this?" And I walked into the living room, which we barely used, and there was a wallet on the mantel. And I said, well, open it, and find out what it is. And it was, a Velcro. Normal little Velcro wallet. And it was Gavin's school ID and there was a crisp $50 bill in it. And we just thought that was rather strange that there would be a $50 bill in a 10-year-old child's wallet.
What did you do with the wallet?
I told George, well, I'm going to call and just send it back to them.
And did you do that?
Yes.
Okay. How did you send it back?
I think Federal Express. Just sent it back so that they would get it the very next day, because I figured he needed the money.
And the $50 bill was, of course, still in the wallet at the time you sent it back?
Yes.
On that visit to the Sherman Oaks Mall, was there anybody else there from the Arvizo family besides Gavin and David?
No.
Did you ever have occasion to meet Gavin's brother or sister?
Oh, yes, at the hospital.
So they were there visiting on a few different occasions?
They were almost always there.
When you went to the shopping mall, did you tell Gavin, prior to going over there, that you would buy him something?
No.
Did?
It was really a last-minute thing. We had actually thought of going to the movies, and there wasn't a movie playing, so we just decided to walk around the mall.
All right.
We knew we would buy him something, a toy or something.
Now, did you ever get a phone call back from David Arvizo with regards to the wallet at any time?
No.
Was there ever a subsequent conversation from David, whether it was a phone call or in person, where the subject of that conversation was the wallet?
No.
At some point in time, did you hear from anybody with regards to an issue of money missing from the wallet?
The way we found out about that was about a month after we stopped having any contact with David. I called Jamie Masada for a completely different reason. I just needed a business number. And, we were talking. He gave me the number I needed, and he said, "Listen, by the way, I want you to know that, remember that wallet?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, David said that the wallet was empty when it was returned." And I said, "Jamie, it had $50 in it." And he's like, "Well, he says there was $300 in it, and that it was empty when it was returned." And I was just like, "Jamie, do you really think we would steal $300 from this child that we've been trying to help?" And he said, "No, I know you didn't do it. But I gave him the $300 just to get him off my back." And I offered to reimburse Jamie $300. And he said, "No, absolutely not. Don't worry about it." I was like, "Are you sure?" And he was like, "Yeah, just don't worry about it."
Did you have any additional conversations with David Arvizo after your conversation with Jamie?
No.
In other words, at the point where you learned that Jamie had given $300.
No.
To Mr. Arvizo, no further conversations?
No.
Were you ever working on a fundraiser on behalf of Gavin?
Yes.
Tell us when that was, in terms of, give us a sense of around the time that you did your shopping spree at the Sherman Oaks Mall. Was it during that time? Before that?
It was right after that, around there. David was getting more frequent with his hints about needing money. And I said to George, let's just go ahead and do our own fundraiser for him at the Ice House, which is another comedy club in Pasadena, and that way we'll just get him off our back.
Have you done fundraisers before?
Oh, yes. Many.
That's not unusual for a celebrity like your husband to end up being invited to do a fundraiser?
Oh, no. We get asked to do many more than we possibly can do.
And you have done many?
Yes.
Over the years?
Many.
What's involved in putting on a fundraiser like this?
We usually contact one of the comedy clubs and one of the owners, they're all our friends. And you usually do a fundraiser on a Monday night, which is a slow night for the club. And the ticket price, which you can set any ticket price you want, will go to your fundraiser. And then the drinks and food will go to the comedy club. So it's kind of a win-win for both parties.
Were you working with David Arvizo in putting this together?
No, I was doing it myself.
Were you having conversations with David Arvizo about what was happening in pursuit of this fundraiser?
Oh, yes. He was really hounding me, calling me and asking me a lot of questions.
And give us a sense of it. I mean, how often was he calling, and what was he asking?
He was calling me like every other day and asking me how much money could be raised. And it was just, he wanted to know how much money can be raised. And I told him I thought we could raise probably between $7,000 and $14,000, which was actually quite a bit for a Monday night fundraiser. But my husband had gotten permission to announce it on the radio station that he was working at the time.
Was his behavior, David Arvizo's behavior, different than what you would expect of people for whom you were doing fundraisers?
He made me very suspicious, because I had never done a fundraiser where someone had asked me how much money was involved. I mean, usually people are just so grateful that you're helping them. And so this was very strange, and I got very suspicious.
Did you finally decide to have a conversation with him that dealt specifically with where the money was going to go?
Well, what I did, was I decided to test him, and I told George what I was going to do. I said, I just started feeling very uneasy. And I said, there's something strange here. I want to test him to make sure that his intentions are honorable. And so what I did was, I called him up on the phone and I said, well, David, I just wanted to let you know, the fundraiser is going to be at such and such a time, such and such a date, and I need to start getting your bills. I need to get the name of your landlord. I need to get your credit card bills, your gas bills, so we can start paying them. And he became, a little like, what do you mean? Aren't I just going to get the cash? And I said, no, we can, prepay your rent for 6 months. We can pay your bills. I said, no, that's not how it works. And he said, well, some people that I owe money to, I just owe them money. And I said, give me their names so we can pay them. And he got very agitated. And I said, well, listen, this is, the radio station is involved, and that's the way it has to be handled, because they need to have documentation. And then he got very angry at me.
All right, you say he got angry at you. How did he manifest that anger? What did he do? What did he say?
He cursed at me.
What did he say? I know this is a little embarrassing, but what did he say?
He called me a fucking bitch and a motherfucking whore, and that's when I hung up the phone.
Was he angry while he was saying this?
Oh, he was irate. His whole demeanor changed.
And loud?
Oh, yeah, it was. He frightened me. I was shaking when I hung up the phone.
Did he ever present like that to you before, prior to that date?
No.
Either in person or on the telephone?
No.
And you were frightened by that?
Uh-huh.
What did you do after that telephone call?
I immediately picked up the phone and called my husband at the radio station.
And you discussed with him what had happened, is that correct?
Yes.
Was the decision made not to engage in any more conduct with Mr. Arvizo?
Yes. George was very angry. And really our suspicions were true. I mean, they came to light that he was just wanting money maybe for some other reason, and it wasn't going to go to the bills. So we decided that the fundraiser was off. We weren't going to do it, and that was it.
How many conversations do you think, telephone conversations do you think you had with Janet Arvizo?
Probably 4 at the most. 4 or 5.
During any of those conversations that you had with her, did she ever ask you for assistance?
No.
Did she ever ask you for money?
No.
Did she ever behave in any way inappropriate, in your mind?
No.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Cross-examine?
Good afternoon, Miss Lopez.
Good afternoon.
My name is Tom Mesereau and I speak for Michael Jackson. You thought it very odd that Janet was never at the hospital while her son was apparently dying, right?
Yes.
And you noted to your husband how strange that was, right?
Yes.
And you didn't quite believe that she was never there because she was waiting tables, true?
Yes.
Did you know at the time she was litigating a sexual assault case with J.C. Penney?
I'm going to object as assuming facts not in evidence and argumentative.
Sustained as to assuming facts not in evidence.
Did you ever know anything about any litigation Janet Arvizo was involved in with anybody?
No.
Did David or Janet ever talk to you about their litigation with any company or individual?
No.
Now, you learned that Janet brought her children to the comedy camp from East Los Angeles, correct?
Yes.
Did you ever visit their home?
No.
Okay. Did you ever talk to your husband about where he thought their home was located?
No.
Okay. You did learn at some point that he visited them in El Monte, correct?
Yes.
Okay. But you never were there?
No. He went to pick them up.
Okay.
Well, Gavin and David.
When you spoke to Janet on the phone, did you ever know where she was calling you from?
No.
Did she ever mention where she was?
No.
Okay. When you talked to Janet, did you ever ask her why you're not visiting your dying son?
Well, the first conversation I had with Janet was at our home, and it was just comforting, and I hadn't been to the hospital yet. But every other conversation David was there, so, no, I did not.
Okay. Did Janet ever visit your home?
No.
Now, to your knowledge, did the 3 Arvizo children visit your home with David?
No, just one. Gavin.
Just Gavin? And how many times did he visit your home, if you remember?
Just once.
Okay. And that's the time where suddenly this wallet appeared on a mantle.
Yes, sir.
And about how high was the mantle, if you remember?
Probably, let's see, it wasn't as tall as I was. Probably 5 feet.
Okay. And do you remember seeing the wallet there?
I don't, because I went directly into the kitchen.
Okay. And you don't recall ever meeting Janet in person, correct?
I don't.
Did you visit the hospital at different times or did you typically visit at the same time of day?
No, different times, just depending on my husband's schedule.
Okay. And you thought you visited about 6 times, right?
Uh-huh.
You thought your husband visited about 12 times, right?
I'm not sure how many times he visited. Sometimes he would go after his shift, without me.
Okay. And you're not sure if you've ever met Janet in person, right?
I don't recall ever meeting her.
Were you ever at the Laugh Factory when she was there with her children?
No, I never went to the comedy camp.
Okay. Now, you did know that your husband was teaching the children, right?
Yes, I did. He spoke about them.
Did he talk to you about what they did on stage?
Oh, yes. He thought they were very talented, especially Gavin.
Did he talk to you about Gavin's skit where he would talk about how impoverished they were on stage?
He didn't go into specifics, no.
Was it your understanding the mother would always be there watching the kids talk about their poverty on the stage?
Yes.
Objection. Speculation. She wasn't there.
Overruled. The answer was, yes.
You indicated that when David told you that Janet was working as a waitress and couldn't be at the hospital, that red flags went up, correct?
Well, more that she was. Not because she was working as a waitress. I think the red flags went up that she was emotional, and the hospital would make her overcome and she couldn't handle it. That, I thought, was a little strange.
Thought it was a little odd.
Uh-huh.
You thought that even with the emotional difficulty, a mother would likely be at the hospital with her dying son?
Absolutely.
And you never saw her there one time?
No.
Okay. Now, you described David as businesslike, correct?
No.
Did you tell the sheriffs he had a certain robotic and businesslike demeanor about him?
I don't believe I said, businesslike. Robotic, maybe. He was very unemotional.
Okay. And you didn't think his behavior was consistent with a father whose son was seriously ill, right?
Yes.
But you always saw him there every time you went to the hospital, right?
Yes.
Okay. So basically at that point, you thought both parents' behavior seemed like something was off, true?
Yes.
But David, excuse me. Let me rephrase that. How many times did you talk to David on the phone, do you think?
I'm not sure how many. He called me quite a bit when the fundraiser, but I really would see him more at the hospital, or the time that he came to our home.
And David told you that Jamie Masada was helping him out financially, correct?
Yes, he did.
And immediately when you met him, he began to sort of hint that he needed money, right?
Yes.
You noticed that pretty quickly, didn't you?
Yes.
It went from sort of hints to direct requests at some point, right?
You know, I think he always skirted the issue with me, because I think he knew that I wasn't really biting.
Okay. You weren't what?
Biting.
Okay.
At his hints.
When you didn't bite, did he seem to persist?
He would, but I wasn't biting.
Okay. Was it your impression he began to work more on your husband than you at some point to get funds?
Probably, yes. I mean, there were many times I wasn't there, so I can't say.
Now, you told him at one point he needed to go back to work and take care of his family, correct?
Yes.
And did he ever respond to that you remember?
He didn't say anything, but his body language, he got very, agitated, oh, he didn't like that I said that.
At this time you're suspicious as to whether his wife is really working, correct?
No.
Did you know?
I didn't know.
Do you know if she was working?
I didn't know.
You didn't know one way or the other, right?
No.
Okay. You thought David was using Gavin and his other children as a tool to seek money, right?
I thought, yes, I did.
Okay. And you always seemed to anticipate that another hint at money was forthcoming when you were with him, right?
Well, he always did it, so I kind of started to expect it.
Okay. Now, you told the sheriffs that during your phone conversations with Janet, she always seemed to be very grateful, right?
Yes.
Very grateful for what you and your husband had done for the family, true?
Yes.
Did you talk to her periodically?
I'm sorry, now?
Did you talk to Janet periodically? No, at the time. At the time you were interacting with the Arvizos.
Uh-huh.
Let me narrow that better.
Sorry.
At the time you were either visiting Gavin in the hospital or they were visiting your house. You would talk to Janet once in a while, correct?
At the hospital. Only if she called the hospital.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, while you were visiting the hospital, did you know your husband was giving David money from time to time?
Yes, just, out of his pocket.
Okay.
$20, $40, $60, something like that.
Right. And Janet would call you from time to time and express her gratitude for all you did for the family, right?
I would only speak to her at the hospital, if she happened to call at the hospital. She never called me at home, except the first time to tell us that Gavin was ill.
Okay. Were you in the mall when Gavin kept asking your husband to buy gifts for him?
Oh, yes.
You were there too, right?
Yes.
And how many shops do you think you went into?
4 or 5.
Okay. And as far as you recall, did Gavin ask your husband to buy him gifts in every shop?
Yes.
Okay. And what kind of shops did you go into?
Into, the Discovery Store. There was a toy store there at that time. There were, actually, I think, 2 toy stores at that time that have since closed. And I think we went into another, shoe store or something like that.
And did you find it odd that Gavin would keep asking you to buy gifts for him and the husband would stand? Excuse me, the father would stand there silent?
I didn't find it odd that Gavin would ask for things. My daughter does the same thing. She asks for toys in every store she goes to.
What about the father?
The father walking away and or not putting some kind of cap on it I thought was kind of strange.
Did Gavin typically ask your husband or you to buy him gifts?
Whichever one was nearest.
He didn't seem to ask his father to buy him gifts?
No.
Did it appear to you he was almost prepped to do this, to go up to you and George to ask you to buy his gifts for him as opposed to going up to his father?
I don't have any opinion on that. To me, kids do that, so that behavior didn't seem strange to me. It was just David always walking away, out of the store, okay, go ahead and buy him the gifts.
What about the son never asking the father to buy him anything? Did you find that strange?
No, because we didn't think they had any money, so.
Okay, you didn't know, though, did you?
Know what?
You didn't really know how much money they had, did you?
I didn't know anything about them, other than what my husband told me.
Did you know whether or not someone named Louise Palanker had given them $20,000?
No.
Knew nothing about that?
I had never met her. Didn't know her.
Did you know anything about Louise giving Janet a check for $10,000?
I'm going to object. Assuming facts not in evidence and irrelevant.
Sustained. Foundation.
Do you know comedian Chris Tucker?
I know who he is. I've never met him.
So you never talked to him about the Arvizos and his experiences?
No.
Alright, now, at some point, you learned that the Arvizo family were visiting Neverland, correct?
Yes.
When did you learn the Arvizo family were visiting Neverland?
One day when we went to visit Gavin at the hospital, he had already been to Neverland.
Okay, and did he seem excited about Neverland?
Oh, over the top.
Okay, did his father talk to you about Neverland?
That's all they talked about.
Did his father talk to you about the fact Michael Jackson had given a truck to the family?
Yes.
And did Gavin talk about the fact that Michael Jackson had given a truck to the family?
Yes.
Did you ever hear him discuss that Michael Jackson had given a computer to the family?
I don't remember the computer, but I do remember the car.
Did they talk about other gifts that Michael Jackson had given the family, to your knowledge?
They just talked about the whole experience. They were very, the movie theater, and the candy, and golf carts, and things like that.
Okay. Did you notice David's attitude towards you change after he started visiting Michael Jackson?
Oh, yes.
And what was the change all about?
Well, all of a sudden, our friendship to Gavin was not as important as them being at Neverland.
Okay.
It just seemed like a shift. That George's time and compassion for Gavin wasn't as important anymore.
Okay. And that bothered you?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you ever discuss that with David or Janet?
No.
Now, did you learn at some point after you had severed your relationship with the Arvizos that Janet had met with your husband to give him a good luck charm in gratitude for all you had done?
I knew about that before. It was a little keychain.
Okay. Do you know about when that happened?
I don't remember.
Okay. Ever talk to Janet about her experiences at Neverland?
No.
Okay. But you noticed a change in attitude in Gavin and David, right?
Yes, and the two other children.
All of them?
All of them, yes.
They just didn't seem to be as interested in you and George anymore, right?
Well, it was just such a fantastic, over-the-top kind of experience.
And they kept talking about how much Michael had given them, correct?
Yes.
Did you get the feeling they were sort of suggesting that maybe you didn't give them enough?
Maybe, yeah.
Okay. Did they talk about gifts that Michael Jackson had sent to the hospital for Gavin?
I'll object as to vague as to they.
Excuse me, I'll rephrase it. Did Gavin ever talk to you about gifts Michael Jackson had sent to him at the hospital?
No.
Did David ever talk about that?
I think there was a basket, but I don't remember what was in the basket. They pointed to a basket. Well, David pointed to a basket, but I can't remember what was in it.
Okay. And Gavin kept talking to you about driving golf carts at Neverland, correct?
Yes.
He seemed to be very excited by that?
Yes.
And did David tell you they were going to keep visiting Neverland?
I don't think so. I don't think that came up in the conversation.
Did he tell you about numerous visits they had made to Neverland?
The one that sticks out in my mind is the first one.
Okay. Now, did you talk to David on the phone about Neverland, or in person?
In person at the hospital.
At the hospital. Okay. And it was your understanding that Gavin was going back and forth to the hospital for treatment?
Oh, yes.
And was it your understanding that while he was in the middle of his treatments, he and the family went to Neverland? Is that your understanding?
I believe it was one of the weeks that he was feeling better and he was in remission.
Okay.
Because he was having chemotherapy. And there were times when he felt better, and right after the treatments, he would feel very bad.
You recall your husband going to El Monte and picking up David and his children, true?
No, just David and Gavin.
Okay. And when do you recall your husband going to El Monte and picking up David and Gavin?
That was when they came to our house, but I'm not sure exactly when, the month or...
Okay. You described to the sheriffs that it was a hot day, right?
Yes.
And how did you remember that?
Because David. I'm sorry, Gavin was still ill, and I remember being concerned that he shouldn't be outside in his condition when it was hot.
And about what time of day did you first see David and Gavin on that occasion?
I think they came to our house around noon.
Okay.
I think.
Now, did you know your husband George was buying gifts for Gavin and bringing them to the hospital?
I bought them also, yes.
And did David express gratitude to you for doing that?
Yes.
Did Gavin?
Yes.
Did Janet?
She wasn't there, no.
Okay. When you talked to her on the phone, though, she expressed gratitude for all you'd done for her family, right?
But not really, more spiritually than being there with Gavin than financially, no.
Okay. Now, you were trying to arrange a benefit in Pasadena, correct?
Yes. Yes.
And that was a club that George had appeared at, correct?
Yeah, he kind of considers that his home club. That's where he started, and it's one of his favorite clubs.
And you told David, correct me if I'm wrong, you told David that you thought you could raise between $7,000 and $14,000, right?
Yes.
And what was his reaction to that?
He was very happy.
Okay, you don't know what David was doing with the money he was given by George, do you?
No, but it was never a lot of money. It was always, you know, money to buy lunch or two, gas money. It wasn't anything, it was always less than $100. It wasn't something.
Right, but you don't know what he was doing with that.
No, we did not.
You had suspicions, didn't you?
No, not about that.
Didn't you have suspicions about the fact that he wasn't working, Janet may not be working?
Right.
You didn't know where the money was going, right?
I was concerned that the family was working on living on a waitress's wages, yes.
But you never asked her what restaurant she was working at, right?
No.
She never told you where she was waiting tables, correct?
No. Our conversations were always more, thank you for being with Gavin, things like that.
When did you ask David to provide you with a list of his creditors?
I think it was in April, near when the fundraiser was going to be.
And your desire was to control where the money went, correct?
Well, I wanted to test him, really. It wasn't to control. I wanted to make sure, if we were going to actually do this and put ourselves out, then I wanted to make sure that the money was going somewhere, and I didn't trust that it was.
And did you believe that Gavin didn't have medical insurance at the time?
No, he told me that he did.
Okay. Did he tell you at some point it was going to lapse?
If he didn't go back to work.
Okay. So what did you think the money was going to be raised for?
To pay their rent, to pay their bills, their electric bill. Things of that nature.
Did you learn that they were raising money from any other people at the same time?
I'm going to object as to they, vague.
I'll rephrase it. Do you know whether or not Janet was trying to raise money from any other comedian at the same time?
No.
Do you know whether or not Janet was asking Chris Tucker for any support at that time?
No.
Okay. Do you know whether Janet was asking Chris Tucker's fiancé for a car at that time?
No.
Okay. Do you know whether any efforts were made to get money from Michael Jackson at the time?
No.
Alright. Did you know Fritz Coleman at the time?
Yes.
Did you know whether or not Fritz Coleman had ever visited the Arvizo home?
No.
Okay. And did you have any knowledge of Fritz Coleman being involved with a fundraiser for the Arvizos?
I do now. At the time, I had kind of forgotten about that fundraiser, because when I think of a fundraiser, I think about the one that I was planning that never came. You know, came to be. But I've heard since then that there was a fundraiser that Fritz did.
And in your discussions with Janet, did she ever tell you that she had come across a large sum of money in a civil settlement?
No.
She never mentioned $150,000 to you?
No.
You told David you wanted to raise money and actually pay the rent directly, is that correct?
Yes.
And did you discuss did you discuss what you would pay the rent for, what residence?
I assumed it was the studio apartment. That's the only residence that, I knew the grandmother had a home, but I meant their residence.
And you hadn't been there, correct?
No.
To your knowledge, your husband had not been there either, right?
No.
He'd been to El Monte?
Yes.
Okay. And David said something to you like, I want cash, is that correct?
Well, yes, when I told him that I needed his bills, he said, well, I thought I was just going to get the cash. And I said, oh, no, that's not how it works.
He didn't like that, did he?
No.
Okay.
Counsel, let's take our break.